been following a biography of Winston Churchill, and I'm struck by Churchill. No references seems to be made to a religious or spiritual interest or understanding. A man who had an incredible faith in himself that he was destined for something great. Had the gift of prophecy, both in that anticipation being correct, as it turned out, so to speak, verified, and all his predictions about communism after the war, and well before it too, of course. He was the leader in anti-communist movement. He was clear on the dangers of Hitler. He wasn't safe in advocating war and so on, in that Britain didn't really have allies, just a relatively enfeebled empire, although vast. And an amazingly brave man, an incredibly experienced man, person who'd come so close to death so often. No wonder he was more and more convinced of his destiny and calling. And of course, the builder of, sustainer of hope, where it would have been absent in a very desperate war for the British. Of course, it was a favoured nation in that the enemy were not on British soil, whereas Europe, of course, was devastated by fighting enemies on their own soil. And Russia too, of course. Well, as far as Moscow. And it's quite a long way, and it's, I don't know, is it all of White Russia? I don't know, whatever. Yeah. You may be very interested in YouTube video, The Truth About Winston Churchill, by a chap called Andrew Roberts. An enlightening biography, it really is. Yes. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. Let me impress on you an observation that I have of Andrew Roberts' incredibly nice character, good character. Whether he's talking about Churchill or whether he's talking about Neville Chamberlain, his opponents and so on. It's very informative what people say about others, isn't it? What I've drawn attention to before, that you can tell far more from a reference about someone. Well, you can tell far more about the writer of the reference than the person they're writing about. Well, I don't mean that the result is necessarily deceiving or something, but if it's someone who's very genuine, like Andrew Roberts here, then of course you find out a great deal about the subject, and you feel reliably so too. Whereas a person who downs others a great deal and mocks and so on, you feel they're unlikely to be avenues of the truth and comprehensive, reliable view. And in that sense, this video is outstanding, I think. See what you think. Bless you. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. A personal note, Churchill was something like my dad's war hero. Our dad in the Second World War was in North Africa, not on the front, but because he was a year or two too old for frontline duty, but as one of these fast-trained officers, British Army, and had an incredibly high opinion of Churchill. And I worked in Lloyd's underwriting, going into the underwriter's house, Lloyd's building, big glass building as it was. And when Churchill died, we had I've forgotten how many minutes of silence. And the whole place, I think it was several thousand people in that room, all men in those days, just stood in respect. And you could feel the atmosphere in the room. Quite a moment it was for me. I was a young man, of course. I was, let's think now. I was only 18, I think. Trainee, junior broker, going into the room each day. Just felt the gravity of his role and of Britain in world history. Yeah. Even so, I'd had the opinion that Churchill was a warmonger and, had we lost, he would have justifiably been had up for war crimes and so on. And coming to New Zealand, of course, he was responsible for massive mistake that largely involved Anzac troops and so on. But I felt in listening to Churchill's story, so to speak, that how could a chap cope with making such big mistakes and still become invaluable in office? Wow. I mean, he was greatly depressed by the mistakes he made. And as was said, quite reasonably, but an astonishing triumph that was a consequence one felt from the account of Andrew there. Well, his belief in his call, his destiny, got him through, and the country, and got America on the scene in the end, and changed the whole of the future. Fantastic. An amazing monument to the power of belief and hope, not to mention being a master of words, of course, but very able in other ways and brave, as we've said. Coming together to be so decisive. He may not have been outwardly very religious at all or anything like that, but in a strange way, a fine example of integrity, of will, of hope, belief, not ostensibly in God, but in what he understood to be the right and best outcome. And sometimes wrong, of course. It's human, child like we are. Yeah. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. It's strange because last night another right-winger, Enoch Powell, a discourse on him, a sort of sketchy biography, and could speak something like 8 or 10 languages, 8 of them fluently. Double first at Oxford. We see the chap who's, I'm not sure if someone was the youngest professor, 25 or something. An extraordinary bloke. Sheer ability. And again, in hindsight, a chap who is so right about his predictions. And you might think from this, recording alone that I was brought up right-wing and right-wing. And I was thinking, no, I've always thought of myself as left, socialist, communist in theory, not in practice, of course. But then not a socialist in practice either. I'm not affiliated or part of anything. Even my society, I feel it's not mine. I've shifted from one side of the world to the other. It makes no difference to me in a sense. The state is the state. It's not actually an entity. It's not a being. It's a conglomeration of people. And all life counts with God. Not just the poor, not just the rich, not just people. That's my value system, It may coincide with various bits of other people's value system, of course. And on many issues not, perhaps. That's the reality of things, isn't it? I used to say, look, I'm not English, I'm not Kiwi, I have citizenship of both, and an experience and familiarity with such, but I'm not Christian, I'm not secular, I'm not religious, I'm not anti-religious. Depending how you define it, of course. If you define it in accordance with my values, then yes, I am. If, on the other hand, you have a more usual definition of such, then I'm not. I'm come that you might have life. Want to love God. all loving, and probably all powerful, but more important than both those things, loves me. Because I'm selfish. I have a dominant priority for self that keeps me in this world to learn the lessons. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. Thank you, Dad. And I'm not asking God for anything. I'm not praying incessantly. Well, except to say thank you. But even that is self-interest, because I know it's in my interest to be filled with gratitude. It's a portal to life eternal. Brings hope, peace, joy, loving kindness, compassion, creativity, love, life eternal. Where was I? Well, with Jesus in the story. I'm not praying for the world. I'm not asking an all-powerful God that loves all life to do anything other than what he's doing already, which I understand to be everything that's right. My request would be an imperfection. Of course, if life's desperate, then we cry out. But he understands that, because we're children and he loves us. I hope he loves us out of self-interest, for I want him to have a reward for his loving kindness. I hope he needs eternal fellowship and communion with a loving family, and that we're it by his grace and kindness and love. Our Heavenly Dad. Love you, Dad. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. So thank you, God, for the inspiring example of these outstanding people. Not their perfection or something. We're not here to worship them, but to be as them. Some successes, some failures in life, mistakes. Mistakes even of will, so that at times we deliberately do something wrong, although we justify it. But we're still part of this amazing fellowship group of children, becoming, growing up, maturing, to be, as I hope, wonderful eternal company for our perfect God. To be as him, to be that perfect fellowship and communion with him and each other eternally. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.